Okay, I'm going to be reading Daniel 3:25 through whenever. Um, Got to get the whole point across. Let me find the beginning. Okay, this is coming from the Daniel commentary, the commentary on the book of Daniel. And 25, he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. The synopsis is the latest phrase of this verse should have been translated like to a son of the gods. 2. Half a millennium before the miracle of the incarnation, God's eternally pre-existent Son came and walked with those who were his own, and in the midst of the affliction. 3. Here shone the glory of the Word, which was to become flesh and dwell among us. In reference to John chapter 1, verse 14, concerning what Nebuchadnezzar said upon the observation of this astounding miracle, Keil explains, the fourth whom Nebuchadnezzar saw in the furnace was like in his appearance to a son of the gods, i.e., to one of the race of the gods. In verse 28, the same personage is called an angel of God. Nebuchadnezzar, having following the conception of the Jews in consequence of the conversation which no doubt he had with the three who were delivered. Here, on the other hand, he speaks in the spirit and meaning of the Babylonian doctrine of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar approached to the door of the furnace and cried to the 3 men to come out, addressing them as the servants of the Most High God. However, this address does not go beyond the circle of heathen ideas. He does not call the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego the only true God, but only the Most High God, the chief of the gods. Irrespective of Nebuchadnezzar's thoughts at this time, it is clear that he had witnessed a manifestation of the supernatural, and such a manifestation as the world had never previously seen. God, who created the very principle of light and heat, was sufficient to control the effect of those natural forces upon the persons of these men who had dared to put their trust in him. To be sure, the thousands who assembled that day thinking to worship some idol, but instead would instead see a manifestation of the power of the one true God that was so astounding as to beggar all description. For in fact, this meeting was turned upside down. But as stated, there's no evidence that it caused any of these people to turn to the Lord. So how so absolutely incurable is the unbelief in the human heart? The Lord had come down and had walked in the midst of the fiery furnace with the 3 Hebrew children, and there had been not only by Nebuchadnezzar, but by scores of others who were nearby. But yet they still clung to their heathen idols and their heathen ideas. Verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spoke and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. The exegesis is, Nebuchadnezzar had asked the question, who is that God who shall deliver you out of my hands? He had then found out as to exactly who and what this God was. 2. This is the second astounding miracle that he had witnessed at the hands of the Lord. The first being when Daniel revealed to him his dream and its interpretation. He once again recognizes Jehovah, but still clings to his other gods. The constant repetition of the names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is not done due to poor sentence structure on the part of the Holy Spirit, but instead by design. The Holy Spirit desires the world to know that the same three men who went into the fire came out of the fire. As well, he desires all to know that as he was with the three Hebrew children, he will be with all who trust him. He is no respecter of persons. To be sure, his deliverance may be different, but deliverance it will be, whether in life or death. By the use of the term the Most High God, Nebuchadnezzar was admitting the supremacy of Jehovah. However, while he did such at the time, there is no evidence that he forsook the gods of Babylon. It seems that his admittance of the supremacy of Jehovah was done partly out of the fear of what this Most High God might do to him, and, as well, the whole of Babylon, if not suitably recognized. Okay, verse 27 says, "And the princes, governors, captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair on their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of the fire had passed on them." The diagram is 1. The fire had power in itself, but it had no power upon these men, nor upon their clothes, except to burn their bonds, so that they walked in liberty. 2. The evidence. I'm sorry. The evidence of this text proclaims the fact that all three Hebrew children were minutely examined by the very responsible individuals which totally attested to the fact of this miracle. 3. Not only were they not harmed, but their clothing was not burned as well, and in fact, there was not even the smell of smoke upon their clothing. The Babylonian god of fire was Isbar. Consequently, this event was all the more important to the Babylonians. The God of Israel was thus manifested as so much higher than this Isbar, inasmuch as he could deliver his servants even when in the very element in which Isbar had his power. Especially considering that the cords were consumed that bound them, but the garments of God's servants were preserved from even the smell of the fire, proclaimed the vast superiority of Jehovah. While the Babylonians had conquered the city of Jehovah and had burned his temple, and had done this through the power of Marduk, or so they thought. But here, Bel Marduk had been openly defied by three worshippers of Jehovah, and had suffered no ill results, but instead had been miraculously preserved. They had been hurled into the very element of Isbar, the servant and ally of Bel Marduk, yet fire had been made unable to harm them or vindicate the honor of this god. What emphasized this was that the fire that spared the servants of Jehovah slew the servants of Bel Marduk, who were eager to show their reverence for Marduk by carrying these worshippers of Jehovah to the furnace. Such a miracle, so wrought before all the high dignitaries of the Babylonian Empire, would go far to take the edge off any taunting reference to the weakness of Jehovah, as demonstrated by the ruins of Jerusalem. Jehovah had shown himself as the supreme revealer of secrets when he enabled Daniel to tell Nebuchadnezzar his dream, plus the interpretation. He now manifested himself as master of the most powerful of elements, fire. As this experience is unfolded before the mind of the believer, likewise the Lord will manifest himself in that coming glad day when the Antichrist raises his ugly head. As he proved himself before the dignitaries of Babylon, he will prove himself as well before the dignitaries of future Babylon and by his second coming. As the Hebrew children were saved then, the Hebrew children will be saved now. Consequently, that was intended by the Holy Spirit not only as a sign to ancient Babylon, but as a sign to the future Babylon and to the entirety of the world.